Well, hey everybody, happy Friday. We're going to be doing something a little different. I'm just going to move the camera a teeny bit there. Rather than doing shout outs between now and Christmas, I'm going to share with you a few little tidbits about some Christmas traditions that we enjoy, and maybe a few stories behind some of the hymns and carols that we share. So that's what we're going to start today. And I'll still do the Groaner though, so those of you that tune in for the Groaner every week, don't groan too loudly that I'm not doing shout-outs, but you will get your Groaner. So today I'm actually using, it's a set of books. It's published by Zondervan Collins, and it's The Traditions of Christmas. This one, and then there's two others in the set. It's a set of 3 books that are on the songs of Christmas. So today I'm going to read to you from this book, and it is about our tradition of putting up stockings. Now, some countries don't use stockings. I believe in Holland, they put out a boot or a shoe. Maybe they're a wooden clog, I'm not sure. But I believe that that's what they use there. Traditionally, they put out their shoe rather than a stocking. But anyway, I'm going to read to you what this says about stockings. It says, the legend of hanging Christmas stockings may be the most familiar in the words of a line from Clement Clarke Moore's classic Christmas poem. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. But hanging stockings is actually one of the oldest Christmas traditions, even though this tradition originated not as a part of the celebration of Christ's birth, but rather as a tribute to a priest. Christmas stockings today are often quite large, usually have names written on them, and are rarely a piece of clothing that can be worn in public. The modern Christmas stocking is often just another ornament, something to hang from the mantelpiece or wall simply because it has always been done that way. In the 21st century, the grand presents that most children wish for at Christmas could scarcely be held in a simple sock. And most kids would be dismayed if all they could claim on Christmas morning would fit into an old stocking hung by the fireplace. Yet in ancient times, particularly in early Eastern Europe, the stockings hanging by the fire was an essential part of each child's December dreams. The legend of the stocking was born out of a mundane but necessary nightly ritual. During the Great Depression, but dating thousands of years before America existed, many families were forced to wash their clothing each night and hang them by the fire to dry so that they could wear the items the next day. Only the wealthy had a closet full of clothes. This was especially true of socks and stockings. Poor children rarely had more than one pair. These stockings were therefore taken care of as if they were the most precious items that the person owned. Hence, stockings hung on the mantel each night were not a Christmas tradition, but rather a daily ritual in both America and Europe. During the 4th century, a priest named Nicholas ministered to the poor families throughout his hometown of Patara and the area around Bari, which is now in Turkey. The son of rich parents, this remarkable man, who had become an archbishop while still in his 20s, felt a particular calling to reach out to the poor. Be it through gifts or kind words, he was constantly finding ways to make their lives and their children's lives better. The 10th century Christian author Metaphrases records that while on a trip to attend a meeting outside his parish, Nicholas heard about a widower and his 3 teenage daughters who lived in their town where Nicholas was staying. The impoverished man and his family were literally starving to death. Things had gotten so bad the father was even considering selling a daughter into slavery. He reasoned that if he sold one child, he might be able to raise enough money to have dowries for the other 2. Yes, Browen, I know you're there. With the dowries, the girls could be married and escape the poverty and hunger that was characteristic of their daily lives. Without dowries, they would never marry and would be doomed to continue their life of abject poverty. Even though the widower made the arrangements to sell his oldest daughter, when it came time to close the deal, the father could not part with even one of his daughters. He viewed his inability to complete the transaction as dooming to all three girls and dooming them to a hopeless life of despair. Hungry, tired, and depressed, the man prayed for help. He had no way of knowing that as he looked to God, Nicholas had already heard his plight. As was their custom, each evening the girls each washed out one pair of stockings and their one pair of stockings, and hung them by the fire to dry overnight. Then they went to bed. The father turned in soon after. Sometime after midnight, someone silently opened a window and tossed a gold piece into one of the stockings. The oldest daughter discovered the coin the next day as she dressed. She took it to her father, who looked to heaven and thanked God for a miracle. The first gold coin became the oldest daughter's dowry. After she was married, a coin astonishingly appeared in the second daughter's stocking. The remarkable event was repeated again for the youngest child as well. Naturally, the news of the magical appearance of money in the stockings quickly became known throughout the community. Most believed it to be a gift straight from heaven, but a few noted that the priest Nicholas had been in town each time the money was found. They also pointed to the generosity of the clergyman as proof that he was the real source of the gifts that kept the family together. Either way, many others wanted to become part of this magical experience. Throughout the land, men and women and children began to search their stockings each morning for gifts. They looked especially hard whenever Nicholas happened to be visiting their village. When Nicholas died sometime around 350, the date of his death, December 6, soon became known as St. Nicholas Day. On this day, because of the story of the father and his three daughters, children hung out stockings. It was almost always the case that the next morning they found treats inside the stockings. Thus, in the earliest recorded accounts, it was St. Nicholas, not Christmas, that was associated with the hanging out of stockings. Stockings would become a part of the Christmas lore much later. In 1823, Clement Clarke Moore's poem, A Visit from St. Nicholas, later be known as The Night Before Christmas, was published. Moore made use of the legend of St. Nicholas, complete with the hanging of stockings, but transferred the date of his visit from St. Nicholas transferred the date of his visit from St. Nicholas Eve to a holiday that was not then acknowledged in America, to the night before Christmas. Thus, it was the simple stroke of a pen that hanging the stocking by the tree or on the mantle quickly became a Christmas tradition that children all over the world annually observed on December 24th. It's 24th, I'm not speaking very clearly. Initially, during the first 100 years after Moore wrote the poem we know as The Night Before Christmas, Santa deposited almost all of the presents into stockings. Soon the children sensed that the size of their foot determined the generosity of the old man from the North Pole, and began to hang larger and larger socks on the mantle. With the invention of electricity and toy trains that followed, a child's Christmas dreams would no longer be held by a simple sock, but the stockings were still hung each year, even though Santa often no longer filled them. Today, when stockings are filled, it is often with candy or money instead of gifts. Some people still cling to the old tradition of placing an orange in the stocking. The orange symbolizes the gold of St. Nicholas's gift to the poor father and his three daughters. Others have expanded the legend to include a walnut for good luck, an apple for health. A small number of people even leave sweets in the stocking for children who have been good, and rocks for those who have not. And in some cases, a chunk of coal, considered a treasured gift a century ago, now marks a child who has been naughty rather than nice. Yet, empty or filled, stockings remain a vital part of the Christmas season. While the stockings hung each year are rarely ones that are worn, and while these Christmas decorations are most often bought, not homemade, what they stand for should be treasured in a modern Christmas as much as it was by the poor widower and his daughters more than 1,600 years ago. Christmas is a time of giving, not just to friends and family, but also to those who are suffering, poor and hopeless. Empty stockings hung at home or unsold stockings in stores should remind everyone who celebrates the birth of Christ to search for ways to make the season bright for those who have not even been blessed by St. Nicholas. Without the priest's action, there would be no Christmas stockings, and the most special time of the year would be missing one of its most beloved elements. So Nicholas provided the example, and the Christmas stocking provides the means to spread the reason for the season far and wide. So there you have the story behind the Christmas stocking. So it dates back 1,600 years. All right, now time for the Groaner. Well, a young newlywed couple decided that they should host Christmas at their home. First Christmas together, they thought they would host it. So they invited his parents and siblings to come, and they invited the bride's parents and grandparents and siblings to come as well. So the big day is here, and the bride is getting the turkey ready to cook on Christmas morning. And so the husband pulls it out of the fridge for her and sits it on the counter. And the bride pulls out a big knife, and the first thing she proceeds to do is cut off the drumsticks and the wings. And she places them in a piece of tin foil and wraps them up. She takes the rest of the turkey that's left and puts it in the roasting pan, and then places everything in the oven. And her new husband is watching this, and he says, "What are you doing?" She says, "Well, roasting the turkey." "But why did you cut off the drumsticks and the wings?" "Well, because that's how you're supposed to cook a turkey. Don't you know that?" "No, my mother never did that. She always just put it in the oven whole." "Really?" said the bride. "No, the proper way to cook a turkey is you take the drumsticks and the wings off and you cook them separately wrapped in tin foil." He says, "Well, I've never heard of that." She says, "My mother always did it that way. It's the proper way to cook a turkey." He says, "Well, why? Like, does it cook faster?" She says, "I don't know. That's just the way my mother did it. And so I know that it's got to be the right way to do it." "Did you ever ask your mother why she did it that way?" "No," said the bride. "I just assumed she knew what she was doing, so that's the way it was done." Well, a little while later, the bride's mother and father show up along with the groom's parents. The groom, making conversation, says to the bride's mother, "Susan did something interesting when she was preparing the cooked turkey to roast." Her mother said, "Oh, really? What was that?" And he says, "Well, she cut the drumsticks and the wings off and wrapped them in tin foil and put them in beside the roasting pan." "Yes," says Susan's mother. And what's your point?" He says, "Well, I've never seen that done before." "Really?" she says. "Well, that's the proper way to cook a turkey. Didn't you know that?" He says, No. He says, "Mom, you never did it that way, did you?" And his mother says, "No." She says, "I always just put the whole turkey in the roasting pan and cooked it that way. Never heard of cutting off the drumsticks and the wings." "Well," says Susan's mother, "that's the proper way to do it. That's the way it should be done." "Well, why?" says the young groom. "Why should it be done that way?" And Susan's mother says, I don't know, but that's the way my mother always did it, and so I just know that's the proper way to cook a turkey." Well, a short time later, Susan's grandparents arrive, and Nathan, the groom, can't stand it, so he says to the grandmother, he says, "Susan prepared the turkey to roast," and he says the first thing she did was cut off the drumstick and the wings and wrap them in tin foil and put them in beside the roasting pan. And she said that's the proper way to roast a turkey because that's the way her mother did it. And so I asked your daughter why she did it that way, and she said, well, same thing. She said, well, that's the proper way to roast a turkey. And she knew that because that's the way that you used to do it. And he says, so enlighten me. Why is that the proper way to cook a turkey? And the grandmother just starts laughing. And he says, well, what's so funny? And she says, well, it's not the proper way to cook a turkey. She says, but my roasting pan was too small, so the only way I could get the turkey to fit was to cut off the drumsticks and the wings and wrap them up separately to cook them that way. That's the only reason I ever did that. Oh, there you go. How traditions start. And sometimes they're not the best, but they get passed on from generation to generation. So as you prepare your turkey this Christmas, just remember that it's okay to put the whole thing in the roasting pan. You don't have to cut off the drumsticks and the wings, but you can if you want to. And don't forget to hang your stockings and continue that 1600-year-old tradition. Until Tuesday when we do some baking, take care, God bless, stay safe, and have a great weekend.